My husband slapped me when I told him I was pregnant. That moment, the split second between the announcement and the strike, was supposed to be the best moment of my 32 years. For 2 long years, Evan and I had followed the same agonizing routine. We charted my cycles, tracked the temperatures, and timed every single attempt. Each month was a fresh wave of hope that crashed into inevitable disappointment, leaving me wondering, year after year, if something was fundamentally wrong with my body. The emotional toll of constantly pursuing something that seemed impossible had frayed my nerves and tested our patience. Then, 1 month ago, everything changed. I missed my period. The initial rush of disbelief was so overwhelming that I took 5 separate home tests in a single sitting, lining them up on the bathroom counter like evidence in a trial. When those unmistakable 2 pink lines finally appeared, I didn't cheer or scream. I sank to the cold tile floor and cried with a profound, aching relief I'd never known. It was real. It was finally real. I called my sister, Carrie, whose immediate response was that I absolutely could not just blurt it out. This needed fanfare. This needed a party. This needed to be a story we would tell the baby someday. So, I followed her instructions. 7 weeks later, our house was meticulously prepared. The scent of a dozen white lilies mixed with the smell of my mother's famous appetizer dip. Every detail was curated to perfection, reflecting the picture of the beautiful, stable family life I had fought so hard to build. My parents stood near the kitchen, my father already beaming. Carrie kept shooting me excited, knowing glances from across the room. Evan's parents had flown in all the way from Arizona, and his younger brother, Jeff, had arrived early to help me arrange the seating and set up the gift table. The house was packed with all the people we loved and who loved us. I watched Evan from the kitchen doorway. He worked the room effortlessly, shaking hands, exchanging jokes, and being the charming, charismatic man I had fallen in love with 6 years prior. My heart swelled, nearly bursting with pride and anticipation. Tonight, I thought, I would make him the happiest man alive. I walked into the living room, picked up a fork, and gently tapped it against the rim of my wine glass until the chatter slowly faded away. 40 faces turned toward me. My mother was already dabbing her eyes with a tissue, intuitively sensing the magnitude of the news before I had even spoken a word. Evan, with a puzzled but warm look in his eyes, walked through the thinning crowd and placed a proprietary arm around my waist. He had no idea what I was about to say. "Thank you all so much for coming," I announced, my voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I know some of you traveled a really long way, and I promise you this is worth it." I paused, looking up at Evan and allowing a small, triumphant smile to spread across my face. Then I looked out at the sea of expectant faces and said the words that had been locked inside me for weeks. "We are having a baby. I'm pregnant." The room exploded. The sheer wave of sound and love was physically stunning. My mother screamed high-pitched excitement. My father began clapping so aggressively I worried for his hands. Carrie jumped up and down, yelling, "I knew it, I knew it." Everyone rushed forward in a flurry of hugging and tearful congratulations. I turned toward Evan, ready for the embrace, the lift, the romantic sweep that would validate everything. His arm dropped from my waist. He didn't move. He stood frozen beside me, his face utterly devoid of color, pale and stark white. "Evan," I whispered, reaching out for his hand, confused. "Baby, aren't you excited?" "We are finally going to be parents." The joy on my face was pure, Yet it did not match the storm brewing in his eyes. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the sound came. It was sharp, loud, and immediate, the sickening crack of his open palm impacting my cheek. The force sent me crashing backward into the gift table, scattering wrapped boxes, and shattering a small glass bowl of punch. The pain was instant and blinding, a fiery brand pressed against my skin. The party music kept playing for 3 more agonizing seconds, creating a bizarre counterpoint to the violence, until someone finally killed the sound. Then there was only the ringing in my ears, where his hand had landed. The celebration had ended. I lay on the floor amidst the wreckage of the gift table, the silence deafening except for the violent ringing in my ear where Evan's hand had landed. I looked up at the man standing over me and did not recognize him. His face was twisted into a grotesque mask of fury, his chest heaving with ragged breaths, his hands clenched into white, knuckled fists at his sides. "You cheating whore," he screamed, the accusation slicing through the stunned quiet. "You really thought you could pass off someone else's baby as mine?" The shock paralyzed me. My cheek was a sheet of searing fire, and my brain struggled to process the sheer impossibility of what I was hearing. "Evan, what are you talking about?" I finally managed, my voice raw and broken. "I've never cheated on you. I would never do that to you." He let out a laugh that sounded like something brittle and hard snapping in half. "Stop lying," he shrieked, his voice escalating. Spit flew from his mouth, and the veins in his neck pulsed with rage. "You can't be pregnant with my baby, Genesis. I had a vasectomy 4 years ago, before we even got married. I can't have babies." The words struck me harder than his hand had. A vasectomy. 4 years ago, he had known, while I had spent 2 years crying over every negative test, convinced there was something wrong with me. He had allowed me to suffer that doubt, knowing the whole time that my pregnancy was scientifically impossible if he was the father. "So, whose is it?" he continued, his voice echoing in the sudden vastness of the room. "Who have you been sleeping with behind my back? How long has this been going on?" The room remained eerily silent. My mother stood with her hands clamped over her mouth, tears tracking clean lines through her makeup. My father looked as though he wanted to physically destroy someone, yet he seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move. Then a pair of warm hands settled on my shoulders. Jeff, Evan's brother, was kneeling beside me, his face pale with horror and shock. He helped me sit up and gently brushed away a shard of glass from the side of my dress. He looked up at Evan with an expression of pure revulsion. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jeff's voice shook with anger. "You just hit your pregnant wife in front of everyone." He helped me to my feet and immediately positioned his body between me and Evan, a trembling human shield. Evan paced like a caged animal. 2 years I let you make me feel guilty for not giving you a baby. And this whole time you were spreading your legs for someone else." He swept his arms wide, addressing the 30 or so stunned guests who were witnessing the collapse of our life. "Look at her. Look at her standing there pretending to be confused. She knows exactly what she did." I stood behind Jeff, cheek stinging, surrounded by the entire family, accused of the ultimate betrayal by the man who had hidden the truth from me for 4 years. The worst realization was that in his mind, he had irrefutable proof. The pregnancy was impossible unless I had cheated. I looked past Evan, pleading with the faces in the crowd for understanding, but saw only judgment and confusion. The public humiliation was complete. One by one, our guests silently grabbed their coats and filed out. They avoided eye contact, their faces averted, their silence a crushing vote of no confidence. My parents were the last to leave. My father hugged me so tightly it was painful and whispered, "I will kill him if you want me to." But I shook my head, still clinging to the threadbare hope that this was all a tragic misunderstanding. When the front door finally clicked shut, I turned to Evan. He was already halfway toward the guest room. "Ivan," I called out, my voice small and thin. "Please, just listen. I don't know how to explain this, but I haven't been with anyone else. You are the only man I have been with in 6 years. There has to be another explanation." He stopped and laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made me feel physically sick. "Another explanation for how you got pregnant by a man who can't make babies." He took a step toward me, and instinctively, shamefully, I flinched away. The flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or recognition of his violence, registered in his eyes for half a second before it vanished, replaced by that hard, angry mask. "I would love to hear it, Genesis." "Really, enlighten me?" I had nothing. No logical explanation. No defense beyond my word, which was clearly worthless to him. "Then let's do a paternity test," I stated, finding a sudden, sharp edge of control in my voice. "Let's prove it scientifically. Because when that test comes back showing you are the father, you are going to have to live with how you treated me tonight. You will have to look me in the eyes, knowing you hit me, called me those names, and humiliated me in front of everyone I love." Something in his expression changed. A flicker of doubt, or perhaps fear of the financial consequence of being proven wrong. He remained silent for a long moment, letting the weight of my threat settle. "Fine," he finally said, his voice flat. "First thing tomorrow." I would have my defense, but I knew the wait for science to save me would be pure hell. The next morning, Evan and I sat in the clinic waiting room like two strangers who accidentally shared a quiet bus stop. Evan chose a chair 4 seats away from me, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his jaw muscles jumping beneath his skin. Every few minutes, he would flick a cold, hateful glance toward me before immediately looking away, as if the very sight of me made him sick. I wanted to grab his face and scream the truth into him, to force him to see that I was innocent. But I simply sat there, hands folded, staring at the muted television screen, fighting the urge to shatter into public tears. When the nurse finally called my name, I went in alone. Even refused to be in the same room while they drew my blood for the paternity test. I felt a deep wave of isolation as I sat in the sterile white room, knowing that even my husband's presence was too much to ask for. Afterward, the nurse calmly explained the timeline. 7 to 10 business days for the results. 7 to 10 days of this agonizing hell. I nodded my thanks and walked back to the waiting room, my legs feeling hollow and detached from my body. Avon was gone. He had simply left, choosing not to wait for me, reinforcing my new reality. The texts from his family began with brutal speed on day 2. Evan's mother went first. "I always knew you were a liar," she wrote. "Now my whole family knows it too." An hour later, his sister followed. "You disgust me. I hope you lose that baby." His aunt sent a long, venomous paragraph about how she had warned Evan not to marry me, how she had always seen the trash in me, and how my nice girl act had fooled everyone until now. His cousin sent a particularly cruel message. A blurred photo of me mid-fall next to the shattered gift table, captioned, Cheaters always get what they deserve. I sat on my bed, reading message after message until my phone screen blurred behind tears. These were the people who had hugged me at holidays, sent me warm birthday cards, and insisted I was part of their family. Now, they were sending curses and wishing harm on my unborn child. The sheer volume of hatred was overwhelming, stripping away every last thread of my dignity. I turned my phone off, unable to absorb any more venom. Later that afternoon, Carrie, my sister, found me still lying in bed. She didn't lecture, she simply climbed in next to me and held me tightly, rocking me like we were children again. "You need to leave him, Genesis," she said softly into my hair. "He hit you, in front of witnesses. You could press charges. You could take him for everything." My mother and father called that night with the same urgent advice. Every person in my life who reached out told me to abandon the marriage, sue Ivan, and make him pay for his actions. But I couldn't. Not yet. I clung to the stubborn, illogical hope that the test results would prove my innocence and rewind time. Everything, I assured myself, would go back to normal. It had to. That night, lying awake with my hand pressed against my stomach, I tried to feel a connection to the life growing inside me. Instead of love, all I felt was a creeping, icy doubt. What if Evan was right? What if the vasectomy made it genuinely impossible? What if, somehow, something had happened that I couldn't remember or explain? The thought made me physically sick, yet I couldn't stop the internal interrogation. I mentally ran through every night of the past 3 months, searching for a gap, a lapse in memory, or a moment that made sense of the impossible situation. Evan and I had followed our routine so meticulously. Nothing explained it. I knew I hadn't cheated. I knew it in my bones. But if Evan truly couldn't father a child, then whose baby was this? The question, unanswered, fueled my self-doubt and intensified the despair of my isolation. I was trapped between my husband's accusation and the silence of my own body, waiting for a piece of paper to either save me or confirm my ruin. On day 4 of the torturous wait, a knock sounded at the front door. I had not showered in 2 days and was wearing the same sweatpants I had slept in, my hair a tangled mess on top of my head. I ignored the knock, assuming it was a delivery person, but it came again, gentle yet insistent. I finally dragged myself to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Jeff, Evan's younger brother, standing on the porch holding a bag of takeout food. "Figured you weren't eating," he said, his voice quiet and genuinely gentle when I opened the door. His eyes, soft with concern, didn't linger on my unkempt state or the exhaustion etched into my face. He simply stood there patiently, waiting for me to allow him inside. I felt a desperate gratitude that someone had shown up without demanding an explanation or issuing an ultimatum. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat down at the kitchen table, which still felt cold and marked by the shouting of 4 days ago. Jeff unpacked containers of steaming lo mein, fried rice, and orange chicken. He didn't ask me what had happened, he didn't ask me to defend myself, and he didn't mention the paternity test. He simply handed me a fork and said, "Eat something, please." I started with small, hesitant bites, having zero appetite, but the food was warm, and his company was an unexpectedly warm blanket against the emotional cold I'd been enduring. Slowly, the physical act of eating began to make me feel marginally human again. Jeff filled the silence with easy, distracting conversation. He talked about stupid, mundane things, a terrible action movie he'd seen the previous week, a coworker who insisted on microwaving smelly fish in the office, his neighbor's perpetually barking dog. He required nothing from me but to listen. His presence was a peaceful, temporary sanctuary. Inevitably, the tears started. I knew they would. But when I finally started sobbing uncontrollably, Jeff didn't panic or pull away. He moved his chair closer, put his arm around my shoulders, and simply let me fall apart against him. I didn't do anything wrong. I choked out between sobs. I know you probably think I did, but I swear, Jeff, I have never been with anyone except your brother. I don't know how this happened. I don't understand any of this. He rubbed slow, comforting circles on my back and shook his head slightly. I believe you, he said quietly, his voice steady. I don't know what's going on with the science or Evan's secret, but I know you're not that kind of person. Anyone who spent 5 minutes with you knows that. I cried harder because after 4 days of being treated like a criminal and a monster by Evan and his family, someone finally saw me. Someone finally believed in my core integrity without demanding scientific proof. It was the first true moment of empathy I had experienced since the party. Jeff stayed for 2 more hours. He insisted on washing the dishes, and before he left, he ensured his number was saved in my phone, telling me to call him anytime, day or night, if the weight of the situation became too heavy. As I watched him drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the party, a fragile, tentative hope. Someone was actually on my side, offering genuine support without trying to coerce me or reinforce my guilt. He was an anchor in the storm Evan had created. He even subtly mentioned that maybe my marriage falling apart was for the best. Given Evan's explosive reaction, cementing the idea that he saw Evan as the true villain. 7 agonizing days passed, marked only by Evan's continued ghosting within the house and Jeff's daily check-ins. I survived the week from hell solely by holding on to the promise of the test results, my sole remaining source of vindication. When the mail truck finally pulled up on the 7th afternoon, I was already standing at the window, exactly where I had stood every day. My heart launched into my throat the moment I saw the white envelope. The clinic logo was in the corner, my name printed on the front, my entire future folded up inside a single piece of paper. I ran outside in my bare feet, not caring that the concrete was cold or that I was still in my pajamas. I snatched the envelope from the mail carrier's hand before he could even place it in the box. He gave me a strange, questioning look, but I didn't care. I cared only about the finality contained within that paper. I pressed the envelope against my chest, feeling my heart pound so violently I could hear it echoing in my ears. This was it. The week of accusations was about to end. I was about to be proven innocent. I called Jeff first. I didn't know why, except that he was the only person who had believed me without proof. I needed him in my corner when I finally proved the world wrong. He answered on the second ring. The results came. I said, the hope making my voice sound unexpectedly bright. They are here, Jeff. I am holding them right now. He told me he would be there in 10 minutes and asked me to wait for him. I agreed. I needed witnesses. Then, I went to the guest room door. I knocked sharply. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Evan. I called through the wood. The results are here. Come out. I want you to see this with your own eyes. I pressed my ear against the cool wood and heard movement inside. Footsteps and the creak of the bed, followed by silence. I knocked a third time. I am not going away. This affects both of us, and you are going to be here when I open it. Finally, the lock clicked. The door swung open, and Evan stood there, his eyes empty. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his face was pale, and dark circles underscored his eyes, confirming he hadn't been sleeping either. For a brief, fleeting half-second, I felt pity until I remembered the slap, the names, and the way he had turned my loved ones against me. The sympathy instantly vanished. He didn't say a word. He simply walked past me toward the kitchen and sat down at the table with his arms crossed. Waiting, I followed him and placed the envelope in the center of the table between us. Neither of us touched it. We just stared at it, the weight of our broken marriage contained within its cheap paper lining. Jeff arrived 5 minutes later. He looked nervous as he entered the kitchen, his eyes darting quickly to the envelope before returning to my face. He pulled out a chair and sat down, positioning himself closer to me than to his brother. "You haven't opened it yet?" Jeff observed. I shook my head. "I wanted witnesses," I explained, looking directly at Evan. "I want both of you to watch me open it, so no one can claim I tampered with anything, or forged something, or whatever other accusation might come next." Jeff reached across the table and placed his warm hand over mine. "Whatever happens," he said softly, his touch grounding me, "I am here, okay? No matter what that paper says, I am not going anywhere." I squeezed his hand, thankful for the one person who had stood by me when everyone else had already decided I was guilty. Evan's eyes immediately locked onto our joined hands. Something dark and possessive flashed across his face. His jaw tightened further. "Seriously," he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "I am sitting right here, and you are holding hands with my brother. Should I even bother reading those results? Or do I already have my answer?" I pulled my hand away from Jeff's and stood up so fast my chair scraped violently against the floor. "Don't you dare twist this into something it's not," I said, my voice strong despite the fear. "Your brother is the only person who has been kind to me while you've been treating me like garbage. He's been bringing me food because I can't eat. So, don't you stand there and act like I am doing something wrong by accepting basic human kindness." Evan simply rolled his eyes. "Just open the envelope, Genesis. I don't have all day for your excuses." I took a shaky breath and picked up the envelope. I held on to the certainty that I was innocent and that he would soon be forced to apologize for everything. I slid my finger under the seal. The sound of the paper tearing was unnaturally loud in the silent kitchen. I pulled out the single sheet, unfolding it slowly, savoring the moment of vindication. My eyes scanned the medical terminology, past the reference numbers, past my name, past Evan's name, and down to the results. I read them once. My brain refused to process the words. I read them again. They still made no sense. I read them a third time, and the paper began shaking uncontrollably in my hands. No, this wasn't right. There had to be a mistake, a mix-up at the lab, anything. Because what I was reading was impossible. "What does it say?" Evan demanded, his voice cutting through the fog. "Read it out loud." "I want to hear you say it." Tears instantly streamed down my face. My throat had closed up. I looked up at my husband, at the man who had loved and then humiliated me, and I couldn't stop the words from tearing out of me. It confirmed everything he already believed. "It says," I whispered, tears blurring the kitchen, "you are not the father." The words hung in the air. "You are not the father." Evan's expression didn't change, not even a flicker of surprise. He simply sat there, arms crossed, exactly as if he had known this result all along. His calm, almost peaceful demeanor confirmed his belief that I was exactly the liar he had accused me of being. "And there it is," he said slowly, his voice steady. "The proof. You've been cheating on me this whole time, and now you can't hide it anymore." He stood up, placing both hands on the table and leaning toward me. "So, who is it? Huh? Who's the lucky guy? Someone from work? An ex-boyfriend you never got over?" His voice grew louder with each question. "Tell me, Genesis. I deserve to know whose baby you're carrying in my house, whose baby you tried to trick me into raising as my own." "I don't know," I sobbed, the words desperate and broken. "I don't understand. I haven't been with anyone else. Evan, I swear on my life I haven't been with anyone else. There has to be a mistake. We need to take another test." He slammed his fist on the table, making the paternity envelope jump. "The test isn't wrong," he screamed at full volume, his veins bulging. "Science doesn't lie, Genesis. DNA doesn't lie. The only liar in this room is you." He pointed a shaking finger in my face. "You've been lying to me for months, maybe years, and now you're standing there crying like you're the victim." "I didn't do this," I screamed back, something inside me finally breaking. The fear and confusion poured out as raw rage. "I don't know how this happened, but I didn't do this. I have never been with anyone except you. You have to believe me, Evan. Please." I grabbed his arm, begging him to see the truth in my face. He shoved me away so hard I stumbled backward, hitting my hip on the counter. Jeff caught me before I could fall, his arms wrapping around me. "Don't touch me," Evan snarled at me, his face twisted in hatred. "Don't ever touch me again. You make me sick." He turned to Jeff, whose arms were still protectively around me. "And you, my own brother, sitting here comforting her while my marriage falls apart. Did you know about this? Have you two been laughing at me?" "I didn't know anything," Jeff said quietly, his voice steady. "I swear to you, Evan. I just came to support her when the results came in. That's all." Evan stared at his brother for a long, cold moment, then laughed that horrible, empty laugh. "Support her, right? Well, congratulations. She's all yours now. You can have her. I'm done." He stormed toward the guest room, and I heard the sound of drawers being yanked open and clothes hitting the floor. Avon returned 10 minutes later, dragging 2 suitcases. He walked past me without a glance of Anne. "Wait," I begged, running after him. He spun around. "Don't touch me," he hissed. "What part of that don't you understand? Please, we can figure this out." "Something is wrong," I pleaded. "I know I didn't cheat, Evan. There has to be an explanation." He stared at me, and for a second, a flicker of sadness or doubt crossed his face. Then the cold mask returned. "The only thing that doesn't make sense is how I didn't see what you really were sooner." He picked up his suitcases. "I'm staying with Felix. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to contact me at all. As far as I'm concerned, you don't exist anymore." The door slammed behind him and he was gone. I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. A few hours later, I called Carrie before the sun came up. The results came back. I told her, my voice raw. "Evan's not the father." She was at the door within the hour, reading the results with a face that grew paler with each line. "Set down," she finally said, placing the paper on the table. We need to talk through this, not the party. When do you think you conceived? I stared at her. What does that matter? The test says Evan isn't the father. Just answer the question. Genesis. You're about 11 weeks along. That means conception happened roughly 9 weeks ago, maybe 10? She leaned forward. Think harder. Is there any night during that time that stands out? Anything that felt different or strange? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to sift through the blurry routine of those hope-filled nights. Then a memory surfaced. There was one night, I said slowly, about 9 or 10 weeks ago. I woke up because Evan was shaking me gently. Then I felt him kissing my neck. I asked if he was in the mood, and he just hummed like a yes. And I remember wanting a baby so badly, I just went along with it. What else do you remember? Carrie asked, her voice dangerously steady. It was completely dark, I recalled. Pitch black. We have blackout curtains. And he never actually said anything. Not one word the whole time. Usually Evan whispers to me. But that night it was just the hum. And when it was over, he just rolled away and went to sleep. Or I thought he did. Carrie was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful, gentle, as if speaking to something fragile. Genesis, I need you to really think about what I'm about to ask you. That night, the darkness, the silence, the way he didn't speak, just hummed. She leaned in, her eyes piercing mine. Are you absolutely certain it was Ivan? I yanked my hands back as if she had burned me. What kind of question is that? Of course, it was Evan. I was in my own bed, in my own house. Who else would it have been? But even as I said the words, a cold, sickening sensation began crawling up my spine. You said it was pitch black. You said he never spoke. Not one word. Just a hum that could have come from anyone. Carrie insisted. How do you know it was him? Because it had to be him, I whispered, my voice shaking. He was there when I woke up in the morning. Nobody else could have gotten into our house. What you're suggesting is insane. Carrie's face was pale, but her voice held firm. I am asking you to consider the only possibility that explains why you are pregnant with a baby that isn't Evan's, even though you swear you never cheated. I stood up so fast my chair crashed backward. I needed to move. I needed to escape the terrifying implications of her suggestion. The hands felt rougher, more urgent. I had told myself he was half asleep. No, I said, backing away from the table. That's not possible. I would have known. I would have felt that something was wrong. But would I have? It was completely dark. Not a word was spoken. Oh, God, I whispered, my back hitting the kitchen counter. Carrie was instantly out of her chair, catching me as my legs gave out. Breathe, she ordered into my hair. We don't know anything for sure yet. If Carrie was right, then a stranger had climbed into my bed in the dark. My body had been used while I thought it was my husband. I had willingly participated in my own violation, desperately hoping to conceive. Ooh, I choked out, the word barely making it past my throat. Who has access to our house in the middle of the night? Carrie went very still, her arms tightening around me. Who has a key to your house, Genesis? She asked. The answer hit me like a physical blow. The only person who had a key was Jeff. Avon had given it to him 2 years ago to water the plants while we were on vacation. We never asked for it back. My mind began racing through the past week, his unwavering belief in me, his comfort, showing up without being asked, his quiet intimacy in the kitchen. No, I said, even as the horrible pieces clicked into place. Not Jeff. He wouldn't. He's been helping me. He's been helpful, attentive, always there, never surprised by anything that happened. We need to find out for sure, Carrie said. Another test, one that compares your baby's DNA to Jeff's. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely stand. If the test came back positive, if Evan's own brother was the perpetrator, what did I do then? The realization was absolute. It wasn't Evan that night. Someone came into my bedroom, used my body, and knew I was too desperate for a baby to question the darkness. It was Jeff. Every visit, every kind word, every moment of comfort, he had known. He had been savoring his victory. Now I had to make Evan believe me. The realization that Jeff was the likely perpetrator was a profound, cold terror. Evan was still out there believing I had betrayed him, and every second I waited was a victory for Jeff. I knew I had to act immediately. I grabbed my phone and tried calling Evan, straight to voicemail. I tried 5 more times. He had blocked me or was simply ignoring me. He's staying with Felix, I told Carrie, grabbing my keys. I know where that is. I'm going over there. Carrie frantically tried to stop me, arguing that showing up hysterical with accusations against his brother would only make things worse. But I couldn't wait. I ran to my car before she could say anything else. The drive to Felix's apartment took 12 minutes. I spent every second rehearsing how I would force Evan to listen, how I would make him see that the man who hit me was a victim, too, and that the real monster was his brother. I took the stairs 2 at a time and pounded on the 3rd floor door until my knuckles ached. Evan, I yelled through the wood. I know you're in there. Open the door, please. I figured it out. I know what happened. After a brief silence, the door swung open. Evan stood there, looking at me like a ghost he desperately tried to outrun. His eyes were red and he looked exhausted. Go away, Genesis, he said flatly, devoid of emotion. I don't want to hear any more lies. I pushed past him into the apartment. Felix was sitting on the couch, looking profoundly uncomfortable, but I ignored him entirely. It wasn't me, I said, turning to face Evan. I didn't cheat on you. I never cheated on you, but someone did get me pregnant. Someone who had access to our house. Someone who came into our bedroom in the middle of the night while it was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. Evan's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? I recounted everything, Carrie, and I had pieced together the night I woke up to someone shaking me, the kiss, the single hum instead of a word, the complete darkness, and the way I was so desperate for a baby that I never questioned the lack of tenderness or speech. The anger in Evan's face began shifting, moving away from me and towards an unseen target. Who has a key to our house? I asked, watching the realization dawn on him. His eyes widened, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. Jeff. He whispered, the name coming out like poison. I gave Jeff a key 2 years ago. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. He's been so helpful this whole week, Evan. Bringing me food, telling me you didn't deserve me, holding my hand when I opened those results. He knew. He knew the whole time because he's the one who did it. Evan didn't speak for a long moment. His chest was heaving, his face moving from pale to red. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled. Get in the car. We drove to Jeff's apartment in complete silence. Evan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched tight enough to pop. I didn't know what he was going to do, and a part of me was terrified to find out. Jeff's building was a nice, unassuming complex. Evan was out of the car before I had my seatbelt off, and I ran to keep up as he stormed to the entrance. He didn't buzz. He just waited until someone came out and held the door. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. Evan pounded on the door with his fist. After a few tense seconds, the lock clicked. The door swung open, and there stood Jeff. He wasn't surprised to see us. There was no shock, no confusion, and certainly no panic. He was calm, almost peaceful, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Hey," he said, his voice easy and steady, as if we were just dropping by for a casual visit. Evan grabbed him by the shirt and shoved him backward into the apartment. "Tell me the truth." Evan growled, his voice thick with fury. "Tell me what you did to my wife." Jeff didn't struggle. He simply allowed Evan to pin him against the wall. Then, he looked past his brother, directly at me. His eyes were intense, hungry, and possessive, like he was looking at something that belonged to him. "Genesis," he said softly, and hearing my name in his mouth made my skin crawl. "I've been waiting so long to finally tell you everything." Jeff smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of his lips that made him look like a completely different, terrifying person. "You might want to let go of me, Evan," Jeff said conversationally. "This is going to be a long conversation, and you'll want to sit down for it." Evan's hands tightened on Jeff's shirt. "Start talking right now. Tell me what you did." "Fine," Jeff conceded, his eyes never leaving mine. "You want to know what I did? I'll tell you everything. But first, you should know that I'm not sorry, not even a little bit. What I did was the best decision I ever made." Jeff let out a small laugh. "Having your spare key gave me so much power. Power I've been wanting for a long time. I loved that I had access to your house. Your life." He tilted his head slightly. "Your wife." The word tasted sweet on his tongue. I'd been tracking Genesis's ovulation schedule for months. She cried about trying for a baby for so long, and I couldn't have my sweet, precious Genesis feel that devastated. But then something interesting happened. Jeff continued, his voice turning cheerful. "You got a vasectomy, and you didn't tell her. You let her believe something was wrong with her body while you sat there knowing she could never have your baby." He laughed softly. "That's when I realized the universe was giving me a sign. You didn't want to be a father, but I did. I was the right man, and Genesis deserved to have the baby she'd been crying herself to sleep over for 2 years." Every word was a physical blow to me. He had been watching, studying, waiting. "I waited for the perfect night," Jeff went on. "I knew your bedroom layout. Knew about the blackout curtains. Knew Evan slept like the dead after his poker nights. All I had to do was slip in around 3 in the morning. Climb into bed. Wake you up the way a husband would." He looked at me, his expression softening into a sickening tenderness. "You were so sweet that night, Genesis. So eager. When I kissed your neck, you made this happy little sigh." "But I stayed quiet," Jeff said. "Just hummed a yes and let you believe what you wanted to believe. And afterward, when you curled up against me in the dark, I lay there for almost an hour just holding you, listening to you breathe, feeling your heartbeat against my chest. It was the happiest I'd ever been." Evan released one hand from Jeff's shirt and pulled it back into a fist, his arm shaking. "You sick piece of garbage." Evan spat through gritted teeth. "You violated my wife, in my house, in my bed. She was never really yours. Evan. Jeff countered, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. From the moment I met her, I knew she was supposed to be with me. But you got there first. I spent 4 years watching you take her for granted. 4 years knowing I could love her better than you ever would. Evan's fist connected with Jeff's jaw so hard the sound echoed off the walls. Jeff's head snapped to the side, and blood immediately appeared at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't fall. He slowly turned his head back, looked at his brother, and laughed. That felt good, didn't it? Jeff said, blood on his teeth and pure triumph in his eyes. Hit me again if you want. Break my nose. None of it changes anything. That baby Genesis is carrying, that's my baby, my child. And you can hate me all you want. But you can't undo that. Jeff stepped away from the wall, now that Evan had released him, wiping the blood from his chin. And these past 2 weeks, those were the best days of my life. Sitting with you in your kitchen, Genesis, holding your hand, telling you I believed you when everyone else called you a liar. Every tear you cried on my shoulder was proof that I was right. You should have been with me from the beginning. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Every moment of his false kindness replayed in my head, but now it was tainted by his sinister motivation. Genesis? Jeff said softly, taking a step toward me. Evan instantly moved to block him. Look at me, please. Come with me, right now. Tonight. We can leave this whole mess behind. Raise our baby together the way it should have been from the start. You're insane. I whispered, the words thin and broken. You're completely insane. The hope in Jeff's expression fractured, replaced by sudden frustration. Before he could speak again, Evan moved. His fist connected with Jeff's face again, and this time Jeff went down. Evan was on top of him instantly, punching over and over. You don't get to talk to her. Evan was screaming, tears streaming down his face. You don't get to say her name. Jeff didn't fight back. He lay there, taking the beating, still smiling through his swollen, bloody lips, and between the sickening thuds, I heard him laughing quietly. It was worth it. Jeff slurred. Every second, every punch, all of it, because for one perfect night, you were mine, Genesis. And nothing either of you do will ever change that. I let out a blood-curdling scream. We called the police immediately after Evan stopped beating his brother. They took Jeff away in handcuffs while he smiled at me through the back window of the patrol car. I told the officers everything. Every detail of that night and every word Jeff had spoken during his confession. The officer listened patiently and told me I was brave for speaking up. But bravery didn't fix anything. What Jeff had done to me was complex and difficult to prove in court. He never officially broke in because he possessed a key. I never verbally said no because I was operating under the assumption that he was my husband. The lawyers called it a, he said, she said, situation. Even with Evan and Carrie as witnesses to his confession, the legal difficulty remained. In the end, Jeff took a deal, some small charge about being in our house without permission, 6 months of reporting to an officer, and a fine. There was no jail time, nothing that would follow him forever the way that night would follow me. Evan and I tried to fix things. For about 3 weeks, we saw a counselor. We sat in a sterile room and talked about trust, forgiveness, and the pain of moving forward. Evan said he was sorry 1,000 times, crying and begging and swearing he would spend his entire life making it up to me. But every time I looked at him, I didn't just see the man who was remorseful. I saw the party, the slap, the hatred, and the immediate choice he made to believe the worst of me. Even knowing the truth, the 2 weeks of hell he put me through still happened. Some things cannot be fixed. I filed for divorce. Avon didn't fight it. I think a part of him knew, deep down, that our marriage had been irreparably broken the moment his hand struck my face. The sheer weight of the stress and trauma took a devastating physical toll. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I woke up in the middle of the night with pain so bad I couldn't stand. Carrie rushed me to the hospital. The doctor confirmed what the blood already indicated: I had lost the baby. A part of me felt a rush of profound relief, and I hated myself for it. That baby was innocent. It never asked to be conceived in such a terrifying, calculated way. But every time I had imagined carrying Jeff's child, every time I pictured a face that might hold his eyes or his horrible smile, I couldn't breathe. The baby was gone, and I didn't have to face the impossible choice of raising a child born from violation. I sold the house. I cut all ties with Evan and his family. I moved far away, seeking distance and silence. My emotional arc has completed its harsh journey. I am no longer avoiding the trauma, but embracing the vulnerability of being entirely alone. The shame of the slap and the agony of the lie were replaced by the quiet, heavy truth of violation. I am beginning a new life, irrevocably changed, but finally free to define my own existence. That, at least, was a beginning. To tell war documenty all parts 8,000 words,